There is a lie the world tells you about weakness. It says weakness is a flaw, a crack in the foundation of a person that must be hidden or destroyed. My pack believed this lie with the fervor of religion. They saw the proof of it in me, in the gnarled, withered flesh of my left hand, a permanent testament to the botched shift that had marked me as less than whole. I was Alara, the weak link, the Omega whose presence was a stain on the strength of the Blackwood pack. The lie was so pervasive, so deeply etched into every sneer and dismissive glance, that I had started to believe it myself. My existence was a quiet apology, a constant, silent plea for the space I took up. But the deepest truths are often found not in the roar of the crowd, but in the silence of a broken heart. And in that silence, a different story was waiting to be written. The annual tribute tour was a time of great anxiety and feigned celebration for our pack. The Alpha King, Kyle, sovereign of all territories, would travel a circuit through his domain, assessing the strength and loyalty of his alphas. For our alpha, Borin, it was a performance. He would puff out his chest, display his strongest warriors, and present a carefully curated image of power. My role in this charade was simple: to be invisible. This year the command was more explicit than usual. Lysandra, Borin's daughter and a she-wolf, whose cruelty was as sharp as her perfectly manicured claws, delivered the order herself. She found me by the communal fire, where I was mending torn hunting leathers, my good hand moving deftly while my left lay useless in my lap, concealed beneath a fold of my tunic. "The king arrives at dawn tomorrow," she announced, her voice dripping with condescension that made the others nearby snicker. "Father wants the northern boundary cleared of storm debris. It's a full day's work. You'll take a pack of rations, and you won't return until after the king's procession has passed." The meaning was clear. I was being exiled for the duration of the visit, sent away so my imperfection wouldn't tarnish their display. I didn't look up, focusing on the needle-pulling thread. Don't let her see it hurts. Don't give her the satisfaction. My silence only seemed to fuel her malice. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you, cripple," she hissed. The word, sharp and venomous, struck its intended target. My head snapped up. Her eyes were chips of ice, reflecting the firelight with a cold, hard gleam. "He can't see you," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "The Alpha King values only strength, a pathetic, half-formed thing like you. Your presence would be an insult, an embarrassment." I flinched. Half-formed. That's what they called me, because my wolf spirit was strong, but my body was flawed, the connection severed at my damaged limb. When the pack ran, I was left behind, my human form a clumsy, slow prison. A bitter taste filled my mouth, but I simply nodded. "I understand." My voice was a dry rasp. Arguing was pointless. It only ever made things worse. Lysandra smiled, a predator's smile. "Good. Now get your things. And Alara," she added, leaning in close, her scent of cloying, night-blooming jasmine filling my nose. "If you are seen, if you cause any disruption at all, my father will have you flayed. The king's visit must be perfect." She straightened up, flicking her long, dark hair over her shoulder, and sauntered away, the other wolves parting for her like a river around a stone. I sat there for a long moment, the leather forgotten in my hands. The heat from the fire felt distant, unable to penetrate the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I was a piece of debris to be cleared away, just like the fallen branches on the northern trail. Unwanted, unsightly, weak. That night I packed a small satchel with dried meat, a water skin, and a thin blanket. I didn't sleep. I lay on my cot in the small, drafty alcove I was allotted, and listened to the sounds of the pack house, the boisterous laughter of the warriors, the excited chatter about the king's arrival. I felt like a ghost in my own home, already gone. Before the first hint of dawn painted the sky, I slipped out. The forest was my only sanctuary, the one place where the trees didn't judge the twist of my fingers or the fact that I couldn't feel the earth beneath my paws. The air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and pine, a clean scent that washed away some of the pack's suffocating judgment. The northern boundary was remote, a tangled mess of undergrowth and fallen trees from a recent storm. It was hard work, my good hand aching as I dragged branches and hauled rocks. But the physical exertion was a relief, a way to channel the suffocating knot of shame and anger in my chest. I worked until the sun was high, sweat plastering my hair to my forehead. I was utterly alone, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The forest didn't care that I was broken. The wind didn't whisper insults. Here, I was just a creature, living. It was in a small, moss-covered hollow, hidden behind a thicket of ferns, that I found him. A sound, a tiny, pitiful whimper, drew my attention. I pushed aside the fronds, my heart pounding with a sudden, inexplicable fear and curiosity. Curled into a tight ball was a wolf pup. He was tiny, his fur a dusty gray and matted with dirt. He couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. He shivered violently, his eyes squeezed shut. There was no scent of a mother, no sign of a den. He was alone, abandoned. My breath caught in my throat. I knew the law. A stray pup, especially one found near the border, was a threat. It could be a scout for a rival pack, or carry disease. Protocol was to kill it, or, at the very least, to bring it to the Alpha for judgment, which for a lone, weak pup was the same as a death sentence. I looked at If, the shivering creature, so small and helpless, and I saw myself. I saw the same vulnerability, the same solitude. The world had judged him too weak to survive, just as it had judged me. A wave of fierce, defiant protectiveness washed over me, so potent it stole my breath. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I was capable of. I reached out, my good hand trembling, and gently stroked his back. He flinched at my touch, but didn't snarl. He just whimpered again, a sound of pure misery. Slowly, carefully, I scooped him up. He was lighter than a bundle of firewood, all trembling bones and thin fur. I held him against my chest, tucking him inside my tunic for warmth. His tiny body was cold, but a faint, desperate heartbeat fluttered against my ribs. I looked around, my senses on high alert. I was breaking a fundamental rule. I was harboring a potential enemy. But in that moment, holding that small, fragile life, I didn't care about the rules. I didn't care about Boren or Lysandra or the judgment of the pack. For the first time, I wasn't the weak link needing protection. I was the protector. And in that hollow, deep in the silent woods, I made a choice. This small life was mine to save. This secret was mine to keep. I had found something more important than pack law. I had found a purpose. The lie the world tells you about weakness is that it is an absence of strength. But sometimes, it is just a different kind of strength, one that the world is too blind to see. And as I held the pup close, his shivering slowly subsiding against the heat of my body, I felt a flicker of that hidden strength ignite within me, a tiny, defiant flame in the vast, cold darkness of my world. The day wore on, a strange mix of grueling labor and tender care. I worked with one hand, the other constantly checking on the pup I'd named Finn, a whisper of a name for a whisper of a creature. He slept most of the time, a warm weight against my heart, occasionally stirring to nudge his cold nose against my skin. I shared my water with him, letting him lick the droplets from my fingers, and broke off the softest pieces of my dried meat, which he gummed at with a surprising ferocity. A bond was forming, silent and swift, a fragile thread of reliance in the wilderness. As dusk began to bleed through the canopy, a low, resonant hum vibrated through the ground, a feeling more than a sound. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated power. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to hide, to make myself small. The king had arrived. His presence was a physical force, a pressure against my senses that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. I could only imagine the scene at the pack house, the forced smiles, the bowed heads, the desperate scramble to appear worthy. And I was here, miles away, with a secret that could get me killed. I found a deeper hollow, a shallow cave carved into the base of an ancient oak, and settled inside, pulling Finn tighter against me. He was awake now, his ears twitching, his small body tense. "Please, stay quiet," I begged him silently, stroking his fur. "Please, just for a little while." The distant sounds of the formal welcome, a ceremonial howl that lacked any real warmth, drifted on the wind. Then, silence. I waited, my body coiled like a spring, every muscle screaming. I should have been relieved to be so far away, but the sheer intensity of the king's aura made distance feel irrelevant. It felt like he was everywhere at once. Then, Finn whimpered. It wasn't loud, barely a sigh, a tiny puff of sound lost in the vastness of the forest. But in the supernaturally charged silence that had fallen, it sounded like a scream. My blood ran cold. I pressed my hand over his muzzle, my heart hammering against my ribs. No, no, no. But it was too late. I felt a shift in the energy, a laser-like focus that suddenly pinned my location. The ambient pressure intensified, coalescing into a single, approaching point. He was coming. Panic seized me. I could run, but he would be on me in seconds. I could abandon the pup, but the thought was so vile it made me sick. So I stayed, frozen in my hiding spot, my arm wrapped protectively around Finn. I was a cornered animal, with nothing to defend myself with but a broken body and a fierce, hopeless love for the tiny creature in my arms. The forest grew unnaturally still. No birds sang, no insects chirped. There was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the soft, deliberate crunch of footsteps on dry leaves. They were impossibly quiet for a man of any size, yet each step resonated with an authority that shook me to my core. A figure emerged from the twilight shadows, and the breath I was holding escaped in a choked gasp. He was nothing like the aging, grizzled alphas I knew. The Alpha King was young, impossibly so, with a face that looked as if it were carved from moonlight and granite. His hair was the color of a starless midnight sky, and his eyes were molten silver, glowing with an inner light that seemed to see right through the shadows, right through the rock, right through me. He wore no crown, no finery, just simple black leathers that did nothing to hide the sheer power contained in his frame. He stopped a few feet from my hiding place, his silver eyes fixed on the exact spot where I crouched. He didn't seem surprised. He seemed drawn. "Come out," he said. His voice was not a shout, but it carried with an absolute, undeniable command that resonated in my bones. There was no point in disobeying. My legs trembling, I crawled out of the hollow, keeping my body between him and Finn. I couldn't bring myself to stand fully, instead, remaining in a low crouch, my head bowed in submission. My scarred hand was pressed into the dirt, the shame of it burning me as intensely as his gaze. I waited for the anger, the disgust, the immediate judgment. I waited for him to call me a traitor for harboring a stray. But he was silent. The seconds stretched into an eternity. I could feel his gaze on me, analytical and piercing. It wasn't the familiar sneer of contempt I was used to, but something else entirely. An unnerving stillness, a deep, profound curiosity. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer this time but no less powerful. "What are you hiding?" I flinched, my arm tightening around Finn. I couldn't speak. The words were trapped in my throat, strangled by fear. He took a step closer. I could smell him now, the scent of pine needles after a storm, of cold mountain air, and something else. Something uniquely his. Ozone. The smell of raw, barely contained power. Instead of reaching for me, he knelt, bringing himself down to my level. The gesture was so unexpected it startled me into looking up. His silver eyes met mine, and for a heart-stopping moment the world fell away. There was no king, no Omega, just two souls in the deepening gloom of the forest. I saw something in his eyes then, something beyond the power and the authority. A flicker of... what? Not pity. Something closer to recognition, and something else. A deep, ancient weariness. The constant hum of his power, the one I could feel vibrating in the air, seemed to quiet for a fraction of a second. The intense pressure in the air eased. Just a little. His gaze dropped from my eyes to the bundle clutched in my arms. "Show me." It was still a command, but the edge was gone. It was almost a plea. Trembling, I slowly opened my tunic. Finn peered out, his tiny black eyes wide with fear. He let out another small whimper and tried to burrow back against me. The king's expression didn't change, but a subtle shift occurred in his posture. The immense tension in his shoulders relaxed by a fraction. He watched the pup, his silver eyes softening almost imperceptibly. He looked back at me, his gaze sweeping over my dirt-streaked face, my ragged clothes, and finally, inevitably, settling on my left hand, still pressed into the ground. He stared at the scarred, twisted fingers, the ruin of what should have been a shifter's weapon and tool. I instinctively tried to pull it back, to hide it, but his gaze held it fast, and in his eyes I saw no disgust, no revulsion, only that same unnerving, profound intensity. It felt as if he wasn't just seeing the scar, he was seeing the story behind it, the pain, the shame, the isolation. He was seeing all of me, and he didn't look away. The Alpha King, Kyle, did not move for a long moment. He simply knelt there, his silver gaze fixed on my ruined hand as if it held the secrets of the universe. The silence in the forest was absolute, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart and Finn's soft, nervous breathing against my chest. I expected a verdict, a pronouncement of my treason. I expected him to rise and drag me back to the pack house for punishment. Instead, he slowly extended his own hand. It was a large hand, calloused and strong, a warrior's hand, yet his movements were deliberate, gentle. He didn't try to touch me, he simply gestured towards Finn. "He is not of your pack," Kale stated, his voice a low murmur that was somehow more intimidating than a roar. It wasn't a question. I swallowed hard, the truth a bitter pill on my tongue. "No, Your Majesty." He was abandoned. Again, a statement. His perception was unnerving, as if he could read the history of the last few hours in the air itself. "Yes. And you chose to protect him, knowing the law, knowing the risk." I could only nod, my eyes stinging. This was it. The confession. The end. I braced myself for the explosion of wrath that was sure to follow, but it never came. He looked from Finn, nestled in my arms, back to me. The weariness in his eyes was more pronounced now, a deep-seated exhaustion that seemed at odds with his immense power. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Ilara," I whispered. "Ilara," he repeated, the name sounding foreign and strangely beautiful on his tongue. He finally rose to his full height, a towering, formidable presence against the twilight sky. I flinched back, expecting a blow. But he only turned his head slightly, looking back in the direction of the pack house. "You're Alpha, Boren," he said, a dangerous edge creeping into his tone. He presented his warriors, his hunters, his perfect strong family. He did not present you. "I was tasked elsewhere, Your Majesty," I mumbled, the lie tasting like ash. A dry, humorless sound, not quite a laugh, escaped his lips. "You were hidden," he corrected me, like a piece of broken pottery, a flaw in his collection. The accuracy of his words was a physical blow. Tears I had refused to shed in front of Lysandra now threatened to fall. He saw my shame, my humiliation, and named it for what it was. He saw. He looked down at me again, his expression unreadable. "The air here," he said, almost to himself. "It is quiet." I didn't understand what he meant. The forest was filled with the subtle sounds of the night beginning to stir. He seemed to notice my confusion and offered no explanation. Instead, he made a decision. The shift in his demeanor was palpable. The contemplative stillness was replaced by the swift, decisive authority of a king. "You will come with me," he commanded. My eyes widened in terror. To the pack house?" "To my quarters within the pack house," he clarified. "You and the pup." Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed through me. To be brought before the pack, exposed as a lawbreaker, dragged in by the king himself. It was a death sentence. Lysandra's threat of being flayed felt suddenly, horribly real. "Please, Your Majesty," I begged, my voice cracking. "He's just a pup. He's harmless. The fault is mine. Punish me, but let him go." Kale's gaze hardened. "Do I look like a pup killer to you, Alara?" The question was sharp, laced with an indignation that startled me. "And do you think I am asking?" Before I could answer, he turned and started walking back the way he came, his steps as silent and sure as before. He didn't look back, but his command hung in the air, an unbreakable tether. "Follow." I had no choice. Scrambling to my feet, I clutched Finn tightly and hurried after him, my bare feet stumbling over roots and stones in the deepening darkness. We walked in silence, a strange procession of three: a king, an outcast, and an orphan. The journey back was a blur of terror. With every step, I imagined the scene to come. Alpha Boren's face contorted in rage, Lysandra's triumphant smirk, the hostile glares of the pack. I was a lamb being led to the slaughter, and my savior was the most dangerous predator in the world. As we neared the clearing where the main lodge stood, bathed in torchlight, the sounds of feasting and forced merriment reached us. The king did not slow. He strode from the tree line like a vengeful god, his powerful aura announcing his return long before he was seen. The laughter died instantly. A hush fell over the assembled pack. I trailed in his wake, trying to shrink into his shadow, my face hidden in the fur of the pup I held. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me, shocked, confused, and increasingly hostile. I saw Boren rise from his seat of honor, his face a mask of disbelief that quickly curdled into fury when he saw me. Lysandra was at his side, her beautiful features twisted into an ugly sneer. "Your Majesty," Boren began, his voice a strained attempt at deference. "What is the meaning of this? This creature should not be here. She was where you sent her." Kale cut him off, his voice ringing with cold authority. He stopped in the center of the clearing, forcing me to stop beside him, exposed to all. "I found her on your northern border. Tell me, Boren, is it your custom to send your pack members into the woods alone and unarmed during a storm's aftermath?" Boren sputtered, his face flushing a deep red. "She is an Omega, a servant? Her duties are what you assign." Kale interrupted again, his silver eyes flashing dangerously. And you assigned her to be invisible. You sought to hide a member of your own pack from your king. He let the accusation hang in the air, heavy and damning. He turned his gaze on me, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. From this moment on, he declared, his voice resonating with a power that left no room for argument, Ilara is under my personal protection. She and the pup will be housed in my quarters. You will provide her with food, clean clothes, and anything else she requires. And none. He swept his gaze over the stunned faces of the pack, his eyes lingering on Boren and Lysandra, shall harm her, or they will answer to me. The silence that followed was absolute, thick with shock and resentment. I was trembling, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't punishment. It was a shield. He had not just saved me, he had elevated me, placing me beyond the reach of my tormentors in the most public and humiliating way possible for them. He turned to me, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Come, he said, his voice now a low command meant only for me. He led the way towards the guest lodge, the largest and most luxurious building, reserved only for him. The pack parted before him like a tide receding from the moon, their eyes following me with a mixture of hatred and fear. As I walked past Lysandra, her face was a mask of pure, venomous fury. Her dream of impressing the king, perhaps even becoming his mate, had been shattered. And I, the weak link, the cripple she despised, was the one who had shattered it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt terrified. I had been plucked from my miserable but predictable existence and thrust into the center of a game I didn't understand, with a powerful, enigmatic king as the only thing standing between me and the wrath of my entire pack. The king's quarters were a world away from the cold, cramped alcove I called home. A fire roared in a large stone hearth, casting a warm, flickering glow over rich tapestries and polished wood floors. The air smelled of cedar and old leather, a comforting, masculine scent. It was a haven of warmth and safety. Yet I stood just inside the door, rigid with tension, still clutching Finn as if he were a lifeline. Kale closed the heavy oak door behind us, shutting out the rest of a world that had suddenly become infinitely more dangerous. The silence within the room was profound, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging inside me. He didn't speak at first, merely shrugged off the heavy leather cloak he wore and tossed it over a chair. He moved with an easy, predatory grace, a contained power that was even more potent in the enclosed space. He gestured towards a plush, fur-covered sofa near the fire. "You can sit," he said. His voice was softer now, the hard edge of command gone. I moved cautiously, perching on the very edge of the cushion as if expecting it to reject me. I gently set Finn down beside me. The pup, seeming to sense the shift in atmosphere, immediately uncurled and began to explore, his tiny nose twitching as he sniffed the unfamiliar surroundings. Kale watched him for a moment before his gaze returned to me. He needs food, and so do you. He crossed to a side table laden with platters of roasted meat, bread, and cheese, the tribute feast I was never meant to attend. He prepared a plate, not for himself, but for me, and brought it over, along with a small bowl of water for Finn. I stared at the food, my stomach growling in betrayal. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice hoarse. I tore off a piece of bread and a sliver of meat for Finn first, who devoured it eagerly. Only then did I take a bite for myself, the taste exploding on my tongue. It felt like a dream, a dangerous, beautiful dream. Kale didn't eat. He stood by the fire, one arm resting on the mantel, and simply watched me. His stillness was more unnerving than any interrogation. I felt like a specimen under his microscope. "Why?" The word slipped out before I could stop it. He raised a dark eyebrow. Why what, Alara? Why are you doing this? Protecting me. Humiliating my alpha. You don't even know me. His silver eyes seemed to glow in the firelight. I know that your alpha is a fool. He values the appearance of strength over the reality of it. He sees a scar and calls it a weakness. He's a coward who hides what he fears he cannot control. His words resonated with a truth I had felt my entire life, but had never dared to name. And you? I asked, emboldened by his honesty. What do you see? He was silent for a long time, his gaze distant. I see loyalty, he said finally, his eyes flicking to Finn, who was now curled up asleep on my lap. I see a protective instinct strong enough to defy the law. That is not weakness. He pushed away from the mantel and walked towards me, his presence filling the room. He stopped directly in front of me, so close I had to crane my neck to look up at him. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the faint, almost invisible shimmer of power that clung to him like a shroud. I told you the air was quiet in the forest, he said, his voice a low rumble. It's quiet in here too. With you. I frowned, still not understanding. I don't. For as long as I can remember, he began, his voice taking on a raw, vulnerable edge that was utterly at odds with the powerful king he presented to the world. There has been a noise, a hum, a constant storm of energy inside me. It's the source of my power, the magic of the first wolf that flows through my bloodline. It makes me the Alpha King, but it also isolates me. It's a constant pressure, a pain that never ceases. It keeps me from sleeping, from thinking, from feeling anything but its relentless thrum. He looked down at his own hands, clenching and unclenching them as if to fight off the very thing he was describing. When I am near other shifters, it grows louder, feeding on their energy, their fear, their aggression. The sycophants and the power-hungry, like your alpha, are the worst. Being near them is agony. His silver eyes met mine again, and this time I saw the truth of his words reflected in their depths, a profound, unending loneliness. But when I found you in the woods, the storm receded, the noise lessened to a whisper. Now, in this room, with you, it's almost gone. My breath hitched. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Me? A calming presence? I, who had only ever been a source of irritation and shame to my pack, was a balm to the most powerful shifter alive? It didn't make any sense. I don't understand how that's possible, I stammered. He took the final step that separated us and knelt before me, just as he had in the forest. He was so close now I could see the flecks of charcoal gray in his silver irises. His gaze dropped to my left hand, which lay in my lap, protectively curled around Finn. May I? He asked, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. I was too stunned to refuse. I could only nod. Slowly, reverently, he reached out and took my withered hand in his. I flinched, expecting the usual recoil, the subtle grimace of disgust, but his touch was firm and warm. His large, calloused fingers gently enveloped my smaller, scarred ones. The moment his skin touched mine, a jolt, like lightning, shot up my arm. But it wasn't painful. It was a surge of pure, clean energy, warm and vibrant. I gasped, my eyes widening. From him, I felt the roaring storm he described, a chaotic, terrifying ocean of power. But as it met my touch, it was soothed, gentled. The raging torrent became a placid stream. At the same time, I felt the change in him. A shudder ran through his powerful frame. His eyes closed and a deep, ragged breath escaped his lips, a sound of profound relief, like a man who had been holding his breath for a lifetime and could finally exhale. He opened his eyes, and the weariness was gone, replaced by a raw, naked wonder. You see? He whispered, his thumb stroking over my scarred knuckles. They call you the weak link. But you, Alara, you are the only thing that has ever made me feel strong enough to stand. The revelation hung in the air between us, as fragile and as powerful as the connection humming from his hand to mine. In that moment, the entire world shifted on its axis. He wasn't my protector because he pitied me. He was protecting me because he needed me. I, the broken Omega, was somehow essential to the Alpha King. The lie I had lived my entire life crumbled into dust, and in its place, a terrifying, exhilarating new truth began to bloom. The fire crackled in the hearth, the only sound in the room for a long time. Kale remained kneeling before me, his hand holding mine, not with pity, but with a desperate, reverent grip. The chaotic energy I could sense thrumming beneath his skin was calmer than I could have ever imagined, a quiet river where a raging flood had been. It was an intimacy more profound than any I had known, this sharing of his deepest secret, his most vulnerable wound. I was no longer just the outcast he had rescued. I was his sanctuary. The thought was both overwhelming and terrifying. The weight of it settled on me, a responsibility I didn't know how to bear. My entire life had been about being small, unseen, and inconsequential. Now, the most powerful man in the world was looking at me as if I were his salvation. I gently tried to pull my hand back, not out of revulsion, but out of fear. This was too much, too fast. He let me go, but his silver eyes held mine, filled with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. I have frightened you, he stated, his voice laced with regret. No, I lied, then corrected myself with a shaky breath. Yes, I don't understand. Why me? My hand. It's a mark of failure. My shift was incomplete. It's a symbol of everything I'm not. Your pack sees a flaw, he said, his voice low and fierce. I see a focal point. The energy, it flows through you, but it centers there. It's not a weakness, Alara. It is a key. I don't understand how, but I know it to be true. Before I could respond, a sharp, frantic scratching came from the main door of the lodge, followed by a furious pounding. Your Majesty! It was Lysandra's voice, sharp with manufactured panic. King Kale, you must open the door. That thing she has is a danger. Kale's jaw tightened. The calm I had brought him instantly shattered. The storm inside him began to rage once more, and I could feel the pressure in the room spike, the air crackling with his rising anger. He rose to his feet, a dark look on his face. Stay here, he commanded, his voice a low growl. He strode to the door and threw it open. Lysandra stood there, flanked by two of her father's largest enforcers. Her face was a mask of feigned concern, but her eyes glittered with malice as they darted past Kale to fix on me. Your Majesty, thank the spirits you are safe, she gushed, bowing low. We were so worried. That creature the Omega is hiding. It is not a lone pup. Our trackers found scents on the northern border. A rogue pack. Vicious. Desperate. That pup is likely a scout, or worse, bait for a trap. It was a clever lie, designed to paint me as not just a fool, but a traitor who had willingly brought danger into their midst. Boren was there too, hovering behind his daughter, his face grim and accusatory. He was letting Lysandra lead the charge, ready to capitalize on any doubt she could sow. Kale didn't even look at them. His silver gaze was locked on me, gauging my reaction. He saw the flicker of fear in my eyes, not of the lie, but of them. He saw how I instinctively curled my body around the sleeping Finn, and he saw the truth. He turned back to Lysandra, his expression utterly glacial. Your trackers are either incompetent or they are liars, he said, his voice dangerously soft. I was on that border myself. There is no rogue pack. There is only a starving, abandoned pup. But the risk, Lysandra insisted, her voice growing shrill. She has endangered us all. She has endangered you. She is a weak link, a liability who acts on foolish sentiment. She must be punished for her recklessness. This was her goal, to turn his protection into condemnation, to twist my one act of defiance into a crime that even he could not forgive. I held my breath, my heart pounding. Kyle took a slow, deliberate step out of the doorway, his sheer presence forcing Lysandra and the enforcers to take a step back. The power rolling off him was a physical wave of intimidation. "You speak of weakness, Lysandra," he began, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Let me tell you what I see as weakness. I see an alpha's daughter who preys on those she perceives as lesser. I see a pack that values brute force over compassion, that would sooner kill a helpless pup than show it mercy. I see a leader who hides his own people out of shame and fear." He took another step, his gaze sweeping over all of them, a king passing judgment. "You are so obsessed with culling the perceived weakness from your ranks that you have become blind to your own rot. True strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the courage to protect it." His eyes, like chips of ice, settled on Lysandra. "You did not come here out of concern for my safety. You came here because you cannot stand to see someone you have tormented be shown kindness. Your jealousy is a stench that fouls the air. You are the liability. You are the weak link." Lysandra recoiled as if struck, her face pale with shock and fury. Her carefully constructed plan had not just failed, it had been turned back on her with devastating force. Kyle looked at the two enforcers beside her. "Get out of my sight," he growled. They scrambled to obey, practically falling over each other in their haste to retreat. He then turned his cold fury on Boren. "Your daughter is a reflection of your leadership, Alpha Boren, and I find both to be lacking. We will speak of your future and your packs in the morning. Pray you find a way to impress me before then." He stepped back into the room and slammed the door shut, the sound echoing the finality of his judgment. The silence that returned was heavy, charged with the aftermath of his rage. He stood with his back to me, his shoulders heaving, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. The storm inside him was raging again, more violent than before. I could feel it buffeting the very walls of the room. He was a tempest locked in a cage of flesh and bone. Hesitantly, I rose from the sofa, my sleeping pup still cradled in one arm. I approached him cautiously, like one would approach a wounded wolf. I didn't know what to say, what to do. All I knew was that his anger wasn't for me. It was for me. He had defended me, shielded me, and in doing so, had unleashed the very power that caused him so much pain. Without thinking, driven by an instinct I didn't know I possessed, I reached out with my good hand and placed it gently on his back, between his shoulder blades. He flinched at the contact, his entire body going rigid. But I didn't pull away. I just rested my hand there, trying to pour every ounce of the strange calm he claimed I possessed into that single point of contact. For a long moment, he remained frozen. Then, slowly, agonizingly, the tension began to drain out of him. The rigid line of his shoulders softened. The furious energy crackling in the air began to dissipate. He let out a long, shuddering breath and turned to face me. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, aching vulnerability. He looked down at me, his silver eyes searching my face. "They have hurt you your entire life, haven't they?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't speak, only nod, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. He raised his hand, his fingers trembling slightly, and gently brushed the tear away. His touch was feather-light, almost hesitant, as if he were afraid of breaking me. "Never again," he whispered, his voice a solemn vow. As long as I live, no one will ever hurt you again. He had seen my pain, and instead of exploiting it, he had shielded it. He had faced down my tormentors and called them what they were. In that moment, the fear I felt towards him began to transform into something else entirely, something warm and fragile and terrifyingly new. It felt like hope. He was the Alpha King, a man of immense power and solitude, but when he looked at me, I saw a reflection of my own lonely soul. And I realized that we were both outcasts, just in different ways. He was isolated by his strength, and I by my perceived weakness. But here, together, in the quiet warmth of the fire, we had found a strange, unexpected equilibrium. The night deepened, wrapping the lodge in a blanket of profound silence. Kale eventually moved from the door, the violent tremor of his anger finally subsiding under the strange, quiet influence of my presence. He didn't sit, but paced before the fire like a caged panther, the restless energy still humming beneath his skin, though muted now. I returned to the sofa, settling Finn into the warm furs beside me, and watched him. The questions I had were a tangled knot in my throat, but one worked its way free. "You mentioned a prophecy," I said softly, my voice barely disturbing the quiet. "When you spoke of your power." Kyle stopped pacing and turned to me. The firelight carved deep shadows on his face, accentuating the harsh lines of his cheekbones and the weariness that had once again settled in his eyes. "My family is ancient," he began, his voice low. "The line of the Alpha King. The power I carry is not just mine, it is the culmination of generations, but it grows more unstable with each passing heir. Stronger, but more volatile. It consumes from within." He walked over to the hearth and stared into the flames, his reflection a flickering ghost in the polished stone. "There has always been a prophecy that a mate would be born who could balance the power, a mate who would be an anchor in the storm. For years I have searched. I have attended countless gatherings, met with every eligible daughter of every alpha in every territory. I was looking for a shifter of immense power, someone whose own strength could withstand mine, could meet it and contain it." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "I looked for a fortress, a warrior queen. I never imagined." He trailed off, turning his gaze back to me. "I never imagined an anchor would be quiet. That strength could come in the form of peace." His confession laid him bare. His entire life had been a quest, not for love or companionship, but for a cure, a solution to his curse. And I was the impossible, illogical answer. A broken omega from a backwater pack. "I am not what you were looking for," I whispered, the old insecurities rising like ghosts. "I am no queen. I am nothing." "You are not nothing," he countered, his voice sharp with conviction. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and knelt before me again, his intensity a palpable force. "Alara, do you have any idea what you have given me tonight? A single hour of quiet is worth more to me than 1,000 warriors. A moment without pain is a gift I had forgotten how to even wish for." He looked at me with such raw sincerity, such desperate gratitude, that it stole my breath. This powerful, formidable king was revealing a wound so deep it defined his entire existence. He was trusting me with his pain, and in that trust, I felt a flicker of my own worth. "My own past is full of betrayal," he continued, his voice dropping lower, becoming more intimate. "Power invites challenges. It invites deceit. The one I thought was my friend, my second in command, tried to sever my connection to the magic, to steal it for himself. He failed, but the attempt fractured something inside me, made the storm worse. Since then, I have trusted no one. I have kept everyone at a distance. The isolation was a shield. I thought of my own isolation, a punishment inflicted upon me by others. He had chosen his, but we had arrived at the same lonely place. I found myself wanting to offer some comfort, to share a piece of my own brokenness to show him he wasn't alone. They used to hold my hand to the fire when I was a child, I said, the words coming out in a choked rush. I had never told anyone this. After the accident, when it was clear I wouldn't shift properly, they said they were trying to burn the weakness out, to make me whole. I stared at my scarred hand, the memory of phantom pain. It never worked. It only taught me that love and pain could come from the same people. It taught me to be alone, because being alone was safer than being with my pack. A dark, dangerous look passed over Kale's face, a fleeting glimpse of the king who could command armies and end bloodlines. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. "They hurt a child," he murmured, his voice thick with disgust. "And then they shunned you for the scars they themselves inflicted." He reached out, not for my hand this time, but to gently cup my jaw. His thumb stroked my cheek, his touch sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. "We are not so different, you and I," he said softly. "We have both been shaped by our wounds." In his eyes, I saw not a king, but a man. A lonely, burdened man who saw his own reflection in a broken girl. The chasm between our stations seemed to disappear, leaving only a shared understanding, a common ground of pain and solitude. A connection was being forged between us, stronger than any pack bond, more real than any prophecy. It wasn't about power or destiny. It was about two lonely souls finding a flicker of light in each other's darkness. The emotional walls I had built around my heart, stone by painful stone, began to crumble. For the first time, I felt seen, truly seen, not as a cripple, not as an omega, not as a liability, but as Alara. And the man seeing me was the one person in the world I should have feared the most. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, a silent surrender to the impossible hope he represented. Finn stirred in his sleep, letting out a soft puppy sigh, and the fragile spell was momentarily broken. I looked down at the pup, this tiny creature who had inadvertently changed the course of my life. Protecting him had felt like the first truly meaningful thing I had ever done. Kale followed my gaze, a faint smile touching his lips. "He trusts you completely." "He had no one else," I said simply. "Perhaps that is the nature of true bonds," Kale mused, his hand falling away from my face, leaving my skin tingling. "They are not forged in triumph or strength, but in moments of desperation, when there is no one else." He stood up and walked to the window, peering out into the moonlit darkness where my pack slept, unaware of the revolution that had taken place in this room. "Tomorrow," he said, his back to me, "I will deal with Boren and his daughter. Their cruelty will not go unanswered." A chill of fear ran through me. As much as I despised them, the thought of Kale's wrath being fully unleashed was terrifying. "What will you do?" I asked. "I will strip Boren of his rank," he said, his voice cold and decisive. "A leader who cannot recognize the strength in his own people is no leader at all. He will live out his days as an omega. He and his daughter will know the same scorn they have shown you." The justice was poetic, but it felt hollow. It wouldn't erase my scars. It wouldn't heal the years of loneliness. "It won't change what I am," I whispered. Kale turned from the window, his silver eyes pinning me in place. "No," he agreed. "It won't. But it will change what you will be. You will not be staying here, Alara." My heart leaped into my throat. "Where? Where will I go?" "You will come with me," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You will come with me to the capital. You will have a place of honor in my court. You will be safe. You will be respected." It was too much to comprehend. To leave this place of misery forever, to be given a new life. It was a fairy tale, and I had long since stopped believing in those. Why? I asked again, the word a desperate plea for an understanding that felt just beyond my grasp. Because you quiet the storm, Alara, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur that vibrated through me. And because, for the first time in a very long time, I do not wish to be alone. He was offering me a gilded cage, a position as his living remedy. But as I looked at him, at the raw vulnerability in his eyes, I knew it was more than that. He was not just seeking a cure, he was seeking a connection. He was as lost as I was. And in that shared lostness, we were finding our way to each other. The rest of the night passed in a strange, dreamlike state. Kale insisted I take the large, comfortable bed, while he took the sofa by the fire, a silent, watchful guardian. For the first time in my life, I slept without fear, wrapped in the warmth of the furs and the unprecedented feeling of safety. Finn curled up beside me, his small body a comforting weight. Yet, my sleep was not peaceful. It was filled with chaotic dreams, the flash of teeth in the dark, the scent of blood on the wind, a feeling of imminent danger that clung to me even as I woke. I sat bolt upright just as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the window. The room was quiet. Kyle was gone. Panic flared in my chest, hot and immediate. It was a dream. He changed his mind. He left me here to face them alone. I scrambled out of bed, my heart pounding. But then I saw it. His heavy cloak was still draped over the chair. He hadn't left. A sharp, guttural howl split the morning air, followed by another, and then the unmistakable sounds of a fight. Shouts, snarls, the clang of metal, though our kind rarely used it. My blood ran cold. I rushed to the window, my hands pressed against the cool glass. In the central clearing, chaos had erupted. A group of large, mangy-looking shifters, their fur matted and their eyes glowing with feral hunger, were attacking the pack. Rogues. Lysandra's lie had become a horrifying reality. Or perhaps, it was never a lie at all. Maybe her trackers had warned her, and she had twisted the truth to use against me. Boren's warriors were fighting back, but they were disorganized, caught by surprise. The rogues were vicious, fighting with a desperation that gave them a terrifying edge. And then, I saw Kale. He was in the center of it all, a whirlwind of deadly grace. He hadn't shifted, preferring to fight in his human form, a testament to his immense power and control. He moved with impossible speed, his hands and feet striking with deadly precision. Each blow landed with the force of a battering ram. He was magnificent. He was terrifying. He was protecting my pack. His pack. All of them. Even the ones who had scorned him. A rogue lunged for Lysandra, who stood frozen in terror near the lodge entrance. Before its claws could connect, Kale was there, intercepting the beast and throwing it aside with contemptuous ease. He was everywhere at once, a king defending his territory, his people, without prejudice. My gaze scanned the chaos, searching for Finn. He was no longer in the room. The door was slightly ajar. My heart stopped. No. I saw him then, a tiny gray ball of fur, cowering near the woodpile at the edge of the clearing. He had slipped out, drawn by the noise or the fear, and was now trapped. One of the rogues, a huge brute with a scarred muzzle, broke away from the main fight. It had spotted the pup. It saw an easy, defenseless target. Time seemed to slow down. Kale was occupied, holding off two other attackers. Boren was down, clutching a bleeding arm. No one else was close enough. No one saw the danger but me. The rogue stalked towards Finn, its lips curled back in a hungry snarl. A primal scream built in my throat. Every instinct, every fiber of my being roared to life. This was not the king's fight anymore. This was mine. I didn't think. I acted. I threw open the door and ran from the lodge, my bare feet pounding against the cold, hard-packed earth. I was clumsy. I was slow. I was human and fragile. But I was all he had. "Finn!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror. The pup heard me and turned, his eyes wide with fear. The rogue paused, momentarily distracted by my approach. It looked at me, dismissing me as a threat in an instant. It turned back to the pup. It was going to kill him. I was not going to let that happen. A fierce, burning energy surged through me, a desperate power born of love and terror. It started in my chest and blazed down my arms, pooling, impossibly, in my withered left hand. As I ran, my scarred hand began to glow. It wasn't a flicker. It was a brilliant, blinding nova of soft, silver light, the same color as the king's eyes. The light was not hot, but it was intensely powerful, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic beat, like a second heart. The rogue shifter sensed the surge of power and hesitated, its head cocked in confusion. It had no frame of reference for what it was seeing. Neither did I. I didn't slow down. I didn't question it. I threw myself forward, placing my body between the rogue and Finn, my arms spread wide in a protective stance. I was a human shield, small and breakable, but my left hand was a beacon, a shining sun in the grim morning light. The rogue snarled, shaking off its confusion, and lunged. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the searing pain of tooth and claw. I prepared to die, but the attack never came. I heard a strangled yelp of pain and surprise. I opened my eyes. The rogue was staggering backward, shaking its head as if dazed. It hadn't touched me. It had come within inches of the light radiating from my hand and had been repelled, thrown back by a wave of pure, placid energy. It was not a force of violence. It was a force of utter, absolute peace, so potent that the rogue's feral aggression could not exist in its presence. It stared at my glowing hand, its feral eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Then, it tucked its tail between its legs and fled, whimpering, back into the forest. The entire clearing had fallen silent. The fighting had stopped. Rogues and pack members alike stood frozen, staring at me, at my hand, at the impossible silver light that was now slowly, gently, beginning to fade. Kale stood 20 feet away, his chest heaving, his opponents forgotten. He was staring at me, his silver eyes blazing with an expression I had never seen before. It was not just wonder, it was reverence, it was awe. It was the look of a man who had just witnessed a miracle, the prophecy he had chased his entire life, the one about a mate who could balance his power, was wrong, or at least, incomplete. He had been looking for a fortress to contain his storm, but the prophecy wasn't about containment, it was about healing. My weakness, the mark of my broken shift, was not a flaw. It was the conduit for a rare and ancient magic. The magic of a healer, an empath, a power that didn't fight chaos with chaos, but absorbed it, soothed it, and transformed it into peace. I was not the weak link. I was the anchor he had been searching for all along. The silver light in my hand faded completely, leaving behind a soft, warm tingle. The rogue shifters, their bloodlust broken by the wave of calming energy, seemed to lose their nerve. With a few guttural snarls, they turned and fled, melting back into the woods from which they came. The immediate threat was gone, but a new, more profound tension gripped the clearing. Every eye was on me. Their expressions were a mixture of shock, confusion, and, for the first time, a grudging, fearful respect. I barely noticed them. My gaze was locked with Kale's. He began to walk towards me, his movements slow, deliberate. The pack members parted before him, their heads bowed low. He ignored them all. He had eyes only for me. I knelt and scooped Finn into my arms, holding the trembling pup close to my chest. Kale stopped in front of me, his shadow falling over us. He looked down at my left hand, the one I had hidden my entire life, the source of all my shame. Now it rested on Finn's back, a symbol of a power I never knew I had. A healer, Kale whispered, his voice filled with an awe that humbled me. The legends spoke of them, a line of shifters with the power to soothe, to mend, a magic of pure empathy. It was thought to be extinct, lost to the ages. He knelt before me, his silver eyes searching my face. Your botched shift. It didn't break you, Ilara. It unlocked you. It severed your connection to the pack's raw, primal magic, but it opened the door to this, a different kind of power, a deeper kind. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Why I calmed his inner storm, why my touch absorbed his chaotic energy, was his natural opposite, his perfect balance. Not a mate to suppress his power, but a partner to harmonize with it. Boren was staggering to his feet, his face pale with blood loss and shock. He stared at me, at the king kneeling before me, and the reality of his monumental misjudgment crashed down on him. He had cast out a diamond, believing it to be a worthless stone. Lysandra stood nearby, her beautiful face a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated hatred. Everything she had ever believed about strength and weakness, about power and worth, had been shattered in a single, luminous moment. And I was the cause. Kyle ignored them. He reached out and gently took my scarred hand in his, lifting it to his lips. He pressed a soft, reverent kiss to my knuckles. A jolt of warmth spread from that spot, flooding my entire body. It was a kiss of gratitude, of reverence, of acceptance. It was a king bowing to his queen. They were wrong, he said, his voice a solemn vow meant for me, but loud enough for the entire pack to hear. All of them. They looked at you and saw weakness, but I see the heart of our people, the strength that endures, the compassion that heals. You are not just my anchor, Ilara. You are my salvation. He rose to his feet, pulling me up with him. He kept my hand in his, holding it up for all to see. This is your queen, he announced, his voice ringing with an authority that would not be challenged. Not by my decree alone, but by the will of the ancient magic itself. She is a healer reborn. She is the strength this world has forgotten it needs. He turned his gaze to Boren, his expression hardening into cold fury. You are no longer alpha of this pack. You are not fit to lead. You will be exiled. You will wander as a lone wolf, and perhaps in your solitude, you will learn the lesson you failed to teach your people. That true strength is not in the fist, but in the heart. He then looked at Lysandra, his eyes filled with contempt. You will remain here. You will serve this pack as its lowest omega. You will learn humility. You will learn respect. And you will spend the rest of your days remembering the cripple you tormented is the queen you now bow to. Lysandra let out a choked sob, her face crumbling in defeat. The pack was silent, their shock giving way to a dawning understanding. They were witnessing the birth of a new era. Kale turned back to me, his expression softening once more. The world around us seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us in the center of the universe. I spent my life searching for a weapon to control my power, he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. But what I needed was a reason to wield it, someone to protect, a family to build. His gaze dropped to Finn, who was peering out from my arms, his fear finally gone. You gave me that. The promises he was making were not just of a throne or a title. They were of a home, a life, a future. He was offering me everything I had never dared to dream of, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I would accept. I had spent my life as a ghost, an apology. But now, I was a queen. I was a healer. I was his. The journey from the Blackwood territory felt like shedding a skin I had worn for too long. We traveled in the king's retinue, a small elite guard who looked at me with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Kale never left my side. He had given Boren and Lysandra their sentences and turned the leadership of the pack over to a grizzled but fair warrior named Marcus, who had always shown me small, secret kindnesses over the years. The rest of the pack was left to grapple with the seismic shift in their world. I did not look back. My past was a house of ashes, and my future was a sun-drenched road leading to a place I'd never seen. We traveled for days, through dense forests and across sweeping plains. During the day, I would ride with Kale. Finn often nestled in a sling I had fashioned, peering out at the world with wide, curious eyes. At night, we would make camp, and Kale and I would sit by the fire, talking for hours. He told me of the capital, of the politics of the court, of the burdens he carried. I, in turn, told him of my quiet life, of the solace I found in the forest, of the small joys and deep sorrows that had shaped me. With every shared story, every exchanged glance, the bond between us deepened. It was no longer just about his power and my ability to soothe it. It was about the slow, careful weaving together of two lonely souls. He learned that I loved the scent of rain on dry earth and the taste of wild berries. I learned that he had a dry, subtle wit that only appeared when he was relaxed, and that he slept fitfully, plagued by nightmares of his friend's betrayal. One evening, as a crescent moon hung in a sky littered with stars, he took my left hand in his. He traced the lines of the scars with his thumb, his touch no longer just reverent but familiar, intimate. "Does it ever hurt?" he asked softly. "It used to," I admitted. "Now, it just feels like a part of my story, the part that led me to you." He grew very still, his silver eyes searching mine in the flickering firelight. "Ilara," he began, his voice thick with an emotion that made my heart beat faster. "The prophecy spoke of a mate, a fated bond that would unite the Alpha King with his balance. I rejected it for years. I saw it as a tool, a means to an end, not as this." He gestured to the space between us, a space that was filled with a quiet understanding, a growing affection that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I don't want you to be my healer because destiny demands it. I want you to be my partner, my confidant, my friend." He hesitated, and for the first time I saw a flicker of uncertainty, of vulnerability in the powerful Alpha King. "My love." The word hung in the air, a beautiful, fragile thing. Love was a concept I had only ever read about in forbidden human books. A feeling I had long ago accepted was not meant for me. Yet here it was, being offered by a king, a man who had seen the very worst of me and had declared it beautiful. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of a joy so profound it was painful. "They always called me the weak link," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "The part of the chain that was bound to break." Kyle's grip on my hand tightened. He brought it to his chest, pressing my palm against his heart. I could feel its steady, powerful beat beneath my skin. Through our connection, I could feel the great storm of his power, but it was calm now, a deep and peaceful ocean. "A chain is only as strong as its weakest link," he murmured, his eyes blazing with fierce devotion. "That is the lie they tell, but a real bond, a true bond, it doesn't have weak links. Every part makes the whole stronger. You don't just calm the storm in me, Ilara. You make me stronger than I have ever been. You make me whole." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to my lips. He was asking for permission, giving me a choice, even now. I gave it to him with a slight nod, a tilting of my head. The kiss was not the desperate, frantic thing I might have imagined. It was gentle, soft, a promise of quiet mornings and shared silences. It was a kiss of homecoming. It tasted of wood smoke and pine and the breathtaking promise of a new beginning. When we finally arrived at the capital, it was a sight that stole my breath. A sprawling city of white stone and soaring towers, nestled in a valley carved by a great river. It was a place of power and beauty, and it was to be my new home. As we rode through the grand gates, the people lined the streets. They had heard the stories, the whispers of a healer queen found in the wilderness. They looked at me with curiosity and hope. It was overwhelming, but Kale's hand found mine, his strength flowing into me, a silent reassurance. Our life together began. The castle was vast, a labyrinth of halls and courtyards, but with Kale and Finn, it never felt empty. I learned about my powers, practicing the gentle art of healing on wounded guards and sick children. The magic flowed from me not like a weapon, but like a song, mending flesh and soothing troubled minds. My scarred hand, once a source of shame, became a symbol of hope throughout the kingdom. Kale ruled with a new kind of strength. His power was still immense, but it was tempered by my calm, guided by a compassion he had learned from me. He was still a warrior and a king, but he was also a partner and a father to the pup who now grew into a handsome young wolf. One night, months later, I stood with him on a balcony overlooking the sleeping city. The moon was full, bathing the white stone in a silver light that reminded me of his eyes. Finn was asleep at our feet. Kyle wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "The forest? The solitude?" I thought for a moment of the quiet green sanctuary that had been my only friend. "I miss the peace of the woods," I admitted. "But I don't miss the solitude. I was alone there." "Here," I said, leaning back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my back. "I am home." He turned me in his arms, his expression serious, his eyes full of a love that still made my breath catch. "They called you the weak link," he said, his voice a low, reverent murmur. The phrase no longer held any sting. It was just a part of the story, the dark beginning to a brilliant tale. "But you are the anchor that holds my world together. You are the link that made the chain complete." I reached up with my left hand and cupped his cheek. My scars were a map of my journey, and every line had led me here, to him, to this love, to this life. The world had told me a lie about weakness. Kale had shown me the truth. Weakness was just strength in a language the world hadn't learned to speak, and in the quiet language of our hearts, we had found the strength to heal a kingdom and each other.